You are an absolute embarrassment. He delivered those specific words. He placed a deliberate pause between each one. He allowed the sheer weight of his statement to fully land. He directed this shame specifically toward the military uniform. It was not an embarrassment to him personally. It was not an embarrassment to the Congressional committee. The disgrace was entirely directed at the uniform itself. It was the exact cloth that he proudly wore. It was the same attire his own father had worn. It represents the uniform that 250,000 women wear at this very moment. It is the sacred uniform that you completely lied about earning. You represent a profound embarrassment to every single person who has ever put it on. This occurred inside the House Armed Services Committee. The tense confirmation hearing for Pete Hegseth had already witnessed several brutal exchanges. Senator Joni Ernst had successfully exposed his stolen valor. Tammy Duckworth effectively proved that he was entirely unqualified for the position. Jack Reed meticulously documented the tragedies of preventable deaths. However, what Salud Carbajal was preparing to do felt entirely different. He was not planning to ask any standard questions. He was not simply going to present pieces of evidence. He was preparing to deliver a final, crushing verdict. When a distinguished Navy veteran who served on the USS Enterprise tells you that you are an embarrassment to the uniform, there is absolutely no appeal. There is absolutely no viable defense available. There is only the harsh, unavoidable truth. If you want to see what happens when a Navy veteran and Marine Corps child who grew up on military bases looks across a hearing room at a man who lied about combat and tells him directly that he dishonors every service member, keep watching. This situation is definitely not about simple politics. This confrontation transcends standard political partisanship. This is one genuine veteran telling another individual that he fundamentally violated the sacred code. Furthermore, the man who violated that code cannot even bring himself to look at his accuser. Salud Carbajal serves as a United States congressman representing the 24th District of California. He is currently 59 years old. He is a dedicated United States Navy veteran who served on active duty during the 1980s. He proudly served aboard the USS Enterprise CVN-65, affectionately known as the Big E, which was the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the world. That legendary ship boasts 51 years of incredible service. Its history spans across conflicts in Vietnam, Cuba, the Persian Gulf, Iraq, and Afghanistan. It remains the absolute most legendary carrier in the entire history of the Navy. Congressman Carbajal proudly served his country aboard that specific vessel. His own father was a dedicated Marine. Carbajal literally grew up living on various military bases. He intimately knows the unique military culture. He completely understands the unwritten honorable code. He fundamentally knows exactly what that uniform truly means. It is not merely about the physical woven cloth. It represents the sworn oath, the massive sacrifice, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, and the intense bond between people who risk their lives for each other and for complete strangers they will never actually meet. He understands the true weight of that specific uniform. Now he was staring directly at Pete Hegseth. He was looking at a man who spent 12 years on Fox News, falsely claiming combat experience he never actually possessed. He faced a man who publicly claimed a combat action badge he never officially earned. He confronted a man who fired 8 distinguished generals and could not provide a single valid reason for doing so. This was a man who argued against women in combat for 12 straight years before conveniently changing his mind 32 days after receiving a political nomination. This individual lied about his military service, his combat exposure, and virtually everything else. Carbajal was preparing to explicitly tell him what all of those lies actually mean. The intense confirmation hearing had already been dragging on for several exhausting hours. Hegseth appeared visibly tired and incredibly defensive. He had been publicly caught telling multiple lies. He had been thoroughly exposed regarding his controversial firings. He had been aggressively confronted with his very own past statements. Despite all of this, he was still trying to deflect the blame and merely survive the process. That was the exact moment when Carbajal suddenly stood up. He did not just lean his body forward, he physically rose to his feet. That type of dramatic physical action rarely happens during these formal hearings. Whenever someone physically stands up, the entire room immediately knows the energy has dramatically shifted. Carbajal locked his eyes onto Hegseth. He did not bother raising the volume of his voice. He simply did not need to shout. He stated that he was going to say something to the secretary that he had never previously uttered to anyone during a confirmation hearing. He declared he was saying it strictly because the words desperately needed to be spoken. He was not speaking for the benefit of the gathered committee. He was certainly not performing for the television cameras. He spoke for every service member currently watching who had been screaming those exact words at their televisions for the past 3 weeks. A heavy pause followed his declaration. He deliberately allowed the massive room to completely settle. He boldly stated that the nominee was a complete embarrassment. Each individual word was completely separated, highly deliberate, and incredibly final. The color rapidly drained out of Hegseth's face. Carbajal relentlessly continued his statement. He specified that the man was an embarrassment to the uniform. The congressman firmly pointed a finger directly at his own chest. He referenced the uniform he personally wore while serving aboard the USS Enterprise, known as the Big E. That magnificent ship served this great nation for 51 consecutive years. It successfully completed 25 massive operational deployments. Those critical missions included dangerous tours in Vietnam and the Persian Gulf. He expressed how immensely proud he was to serve aboard that vessel. He noted his profound pride in wearing that specific military uniform. He stated firmly that he had legitimately earned his status. His vocal tone grew noticeably harder and much sharper. He bluntly accused the nominee of completely lying about earning his own. The massive congressional chamber fell completely and utterly silent. Carbajal slowly moved his outstretched hand. He pointed his finger straight at Pete Hegseth. He reminded the man that he had falsely claimed active combat experience. He recalled how Senator Ernst recently asked him to produce his combat action badge. He pointed out that the nominee lacks one entirely because he never actually participated in live combat. He plainly stated that the man had blatantly lied. Another incredibly tense pause blanketed the quiet room. He noted the false claims of leading soldiers, pointing out he never actually led troops during a chaotic firefight. He highlighted that the nominee proceeded to fire 8 respected generals who actually had led in combat. When asked to provide a single reason for those terminations, he sat in absolute silence for 67 seconds because he lacked any legitimate justification. He simply dismissed them because he personally disliked them. Carbajal's powerful voice was visibly shaking at this point in the hearing. The trembling was definitely not caused by internal fear. It was fueled entirely by pure fury. It was a deeply uncompromising and completely righteous fury. Subscribe right now because what Salud Carbajal is about to say next is the most devastating 90 seconds of the entire confirmation hearing. A Navy veteran who served on the most legendary carrier in history is about to tell a man who lied about combat that he dishonors every person who ever wore the uniform. When he finally delivers this blow, Pete Hegseth will be completely unable to meet his gaze. He will find himself entirely unable to speak a single word. He will be forced to merely sit there and fully absorb the crushing weight of his deceptive actions. Keep watching as this dramatic scene unfolds. Carbajal boldly stepped forward. His movement was not violently aggressive, but just close enough so Hegseth could clearly see the intensity in his face. He moved closer to ensure there was absolutely nowhere left to hide. He stated clearly that his own father had served as a Marine. He reminded everyone that he was raised entirely on military bases. He declared that he truly understands what the military uniform signifies. He explained that it represents so much more than basic woven cloth. It acts as a solemn, unbreakable promise. It is a binding promise that you will always tell the unvarnished truth. It demands that you must consistently lead with absolute integrity. It requires prioritizing the assigned mission and your fellow people far above your own self-interest. His commanding voice cracked slightly under the heavy emotional weight. He bluntly accused the nominee of completely violating that sacred promise. Hegseth desperately attempted to speak up. He stammered out the simple words, "Senator." Carbajal immediately held up his hand to stop him. He firmly declared that he was not yet finished speaking. The entire hearing room anxiously held its collective breath. He noted that for 12 long years, the nominee argued that women did not belong in combat roles. He pointed out that this offensive opinion was literally published in his own book. He mentioned that this man had repeatedly broadcasted this belief across various podcasts. He reiterated that this identical stance was broadcast frequently on Fox News. The consistent message was that women fundamentally do not belong in active combat zones. He delivered that harsh opinion straight up, without any hesitation. Carbajal's powerful voice began to drastically rise in volume. He shouted that 250,000 women are actively serving in the United States military right now. He repeated that they are serving at this very second. For more than a decade, you publicly declared that they did not belong in those ranks. The angry congressman aggressively leaned his body forward. Then, suddenly, you received a prestigious cabinet nomination. A mere 32 days later, you miraculously decided to claim that some of our greatest warriors are actually women. He paused briefly to let the stinging words linger. He allowed the sheer, undeniable hypocrisy of the situation to fully settle over the room. He asked if the nominee realized exactly what that sudden reversal tells those female service members. It clearly demonstrates that you possess absolutely zero genuine belief in their true capabilities. You simply recited whatever convenient words were necessary to secure your political confirmation. You blatantly lied directly to their faces. This was exactly how you cowardly lied regarding your fabricated combat experience. This mirrored the exact way you lied about your true motivations for firing distinguished generals. You fundamentally exist to tell endless lies. Carbajal's deep voice finally grew completely steady. His tone became absolutely freezing and devoid of warmth. He explained that this constant deception is precisely why he is a total embarrassment. It is not simply due to his glaring lack of professional qualifications. The government has definitely dealt with incredibly unqualified nominees in the past. It is also not primarily because of his severe lack of relevant experience. Congress has certainly confirmed vastly inexperienced nominees on previous occasions. He aimed his finger directly at Hegseth's pale face. You stand as an embarrassment because you completely lied about the one sacred thing that legitimate service members never fabricate. That one incredibly sacred thing is active combat. That single powerful word hung suspended in the tense air. Carbajal slowly took a deliberate step backward. He stated that when he personally wore that uniform, he completely understood its profound meaning. When his father proudly wore his Marine Corps uniform, he also fully grasped its massive significance. It strictly meant that if you claimed to have seen combat, you had absolutely survived real combat. If you claimed you received a specific military decoration, you had legitimately earned that honor. If you boasted about leading troops into danger, you had genuinely led those brave individuals. His booming voice momentarily broke once again. You simply do not possess the right to fabricate stories about those traumatic experiences. You absolutely cannot claim credit for horrific things you never actually endured. Because whenever you lie about your personal service, you directly dishonor my own sacrifices. You deeply dishonor the lifelong sacrifices made by my own honorable father. You severely dishonor every single individual who bravely performed the terrifying duties you merely pretended to accomplish. Hegseth kept his hands pressed completely flat against the wooden table. His anxious knuckles turned completely white from the intense pressure. He found himself entirely unable to cast his eyes upward. Carbajal's voice dropped to a much quieter volume, yet it somehow sounded infinitely harder. He noted that he had served on this specific committee for many long years. He had frequently cast votes to confirm individuals with whom he fundamentally disagreed. He had supported candidates whose political policies he actively opposed. He did this simply because he believed those nominees would execute their duties with true integrity. He firmly trusted that those individuals would always prioritize telling the truth. He slowly shook his head in absolute disgust. But you are entirely different. You absolutely refuse to tell the simple truth. You have consistently lied regarding your official military record. You have completely fabricated your so-called core beliefs. You have utilized countless lies merely to secure this powerful job. Furthermore, if you are willing to lie to obtain power, you will inevitably lie to maintain it. He allowed another heavy pause to fill the quiet room. He declared that he simply could not cast a vote in favor of such corruption. He forcefully stated that he absolutely will not vote for that behavior. He explained his reasoning, stating that the brave people wearing that uniform deserve vastly better leadership. Carbajal shifted his focus and pointed directly at the broadcasting camera. He aimed his gesture toward all the citizens watching the proceedings. Those service members desperately deserve a true leader who legitimately earned their high-ranking position. They require a commander who consistently tells the honest truth. They need an authority figure who genuinely respects their massive sacrifices. They deserve someone who completely honors the sacred uniform. His passionate voice rose significantly for one final statement. He explicitly told Hegseth that he is definitely not that required leader. You stand as an absolute embarrassment to the very uniform that I proudly wore. You disgrace the identical uniform that my honorable father once wore. You insult the same uniform that 250,000 dedicated women are wearing at this exact moment. You are an embarrassment to every single service member who actually earned their rightful place within those ranks. He delivered one final, devastating pause. He let the sheer gravity of his words completely crush the remaining air out of the room. He ended by stating that the nominee absolutely knows this harsh reality. Carbajal finally lowered himself back into his seat. He certainly did not wait around to hear any pathetic response. He simply did not require any further explanation. He had effectively communicated exactly what he originally came there to say. The massive chamber remained completely and totally silent. The crowd was not necessarily sitting in shocked disbelief. They were just sitting in pure, unbroken silence. It was an incredibly heavy, oppressive form of silence. They were collectively processing the immense weight of the unvarnished truth. Hegseth remained sitting completely frozen in his chair. His complexion remained a sickly, ghostly pale. His clammy hands were visibly shaking against the wood. He desperately tried to force his mouth open. Absolutely no sound managed to escape his lips. He remained mute simply because there was nothing left to say. He lacked any conceivable defense for his actions. He possessed absolutely no factual rebuttal to offer. He was left entirely exposed to the brutal truth. He was nothing more than a profound embarrassment. Furthermore, every single person present in that hearing room knew it was true. Every individual watching the broadcast from home fully understood the reality. Most importantly, Pete Hegseth internally knew the reality of his own deceit. The committee chairman clumsily attempted to move the proceedings along. He called for the next scheduled question on the docket. However, the fundamental energy in the room had permanently shifted. This happened precisely because Carbajal had never actually asked a single question. He had effectively delivered a binding moral verdict. Definitive verdicts are incredibly difficult to appeal within the unforgiving court of public opinion. Within a single hour, the explosive video clip was absolutely everywhere across the internet. It did not go viral simply due to its political nature. It spread rapidly because every spoken word rang completely true. Countless veterans eagerly shared the footage. Active duty personnel enthusiastically distributed the video link. Proud military families heavily circulated the incredible moment online. They did not even bother adding any personal commentary. They simply posted the raw video footage. They shared it because Carbajal perfectly articulated what they had all been feeling for weeks. It featured someone who legitimately earned the uniform telling a fraud that he deeply dishonored everyone who actually sacrificed for it. That raw interaction fundamentally transcends standard politics. That moment represents the purest form of true accountability. When a Navy veteran from the USS Enterprise, the most legendary carrier in history, labels you an embarrassment to the uniform, you completely lose the right to argue. You no longer possess the privilege to deflect the blame onto others. You are forced to simply sit in your chair and carry the massive weight of your own terrible actions. Make sure to subscribe to this channel right now. Please share this powerful message with every single veteran you personally know. Send it to every active-duty service member currently defending the nation. Ensure every military family watches this incredible confrontation. Do this because Salud Carbajal bravely stated exactly what desperately needed to be said aloud. He did not launch this attack to score cheap political points. He spoke up for every honest person who ever wore the uniform and told the truth regarding their personal service. This devastating outcome is exactly what happens when pathetic stolen valor directly collides with authentic military service. Salud Carbajal is a Navy veteran from the USS Enterprise, spent years on active duty, was raised by a Marine on military bases, and inherently understands the code, the oath, and the true meaning of the uniform. And he stared straight through Pete Hegseth. He glared at a man who lied about combat, claimed unearned decorations, unjustifiably fired generals, and flipped his core beliefs in 32 days simply to secure a job. He proceeded to deliver a crushing statement that will undoubtedly haunt Hegseth for the remainder of his natural life. He told him that he was an absolute embarrassment. He clarified that he was not an embarrassment to him personally. He was not merely an embarrassment to the assembled committee members. He was a complete embarrassment to the sacred uniform itself. He disgraced the very uniform that he had completely lied about earning. He insulted the same uniform worn by 250,000 women right now, even while he openly questioned whether they truly belonged in it. He mocked the uniform that 8 fired generals had worn with immense honor before he removed them without any justifiable cause. He completely dishonored that specific hallowed uniform. When an honorable Navy veteran looks you in the eye and tells you that you dishonor that cloth, there is absolutely no coming back from that devastating blow. There is no clever public relations spin that can save you. There is absolutely no political talking point that can repair the damage. At that point, there is only the cold, hard truth. You completely lied about your past. Consequently, you deeply dishonored every single brave individual who chose not to lie. That fundamental lack of integrity is exactly why you remain an absolute embarrassment. It is entirely divorced from your specific brand of politics. It has absolutely nothing to do with your conservative beliefs. It is entirely because you aggressively violated the sacred military code. You broke the fundamental unwritten rule that every single authentic service member intuitively knows. You never ever lie about experiencing the horrors of combat. You absolutely never claim to possess military decorations that you did not legitimately earn. Above all else, you never intentionally dishonor the military uniform. Pete Hegseth shamelessly committed all 3 of those unforgivable sins. Fortunately, Salud Carbajal bravely made sure that the entire country finally knows it. It took a mere 90 seconds of unbroken truth from one dedicated Navy veteran to expose him. He delivered one crushing verdict, declaring him an embarrassment to the uniform, and he is absolutely right.